Thank you. So thank you to Barbara and to Bill for inviting us into their home. And I'm glad to be meeting everyone so far, and I'm going to try to remember names, but please forgive me if I don't. And my name is Itasca Small, and I am running as a write-in, official write-in candidate. So I wouldn't emphasize that, except that if the word doesn't get out that you have to write in my name, I won't be voted for.
Does it have to be
spelled? The other
spelled?
candidates are for your position.
The other candidate is the incumbent, Bob Worsley.
Oh.
And as far as I know, I haven't checked in the last few days, but as far as I know, there is not anyone running on the Democrat side or any other side, unless, and if they were going to, it would have to be as a write-in at this point, because they didn't file to be on the ballot. So,
Thank you for running.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, and thank you all for being here. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that I do have a flyer up there that tells you quite a bit about me, and I do have a website, which is itascasmall.com, and on there you can find a whole lot more about me. But I would like to just point out a couple of things that I do have on the flyer, because they're important. And number one, Itasca Small equals small government. I am for restoring our Constitution and all that means. It means bringing back the purpose of government, which is to protect rights. The more government takes away our ability to make our own decisions and choices and be accountable for our own choices, the more they take away our rights. So by usurping more power from the people, they do destroy our rights. So we have to understand that that's what is happening. And I know that I'm sure all of you here do understand that, but I want to get that across to people that that's what I do understand. And I am for limited government. I am for the fact that the Constitution is a negative document in that it tells the federal government what it can do, and anything else it can't do. Anything that's not listed, it's not supposed to do anything. And that's where we've been transformed into people thinking that the federal government can do whatever it wants. So I am for restoring our Constitution. I have been active in as a citizen lobbyist with the legislative sessions last year and this year, and have spent most of my time fighting against Common Core and for parental rights to direct their children's education, and especially for protecting our elective office of State Superintendent of Public Instruction. We failed to stop them this time in destroying a lot of the inherent constitutional powers that the office is supposed to have. And that's one of my most pressing issues that I have been fighting and will continue to fight. And along with that, I also want to point out that I am against the Medicaid expansion that brought Obamacare to Arizona, and I am against, as an example, I'm against the $45 million that was committed of taxpayers' money in one of the last bills passed this session for the state to pay $1.5 million annually to promote auto racing. And there are certain conditions that whether or not the money kicks in, but it's obvious that they know it's going to fit the conditions, or they wouldn't have passed the law the way it is, in my opinion. So it begins in 2021 and goes for 30 years if we don't stop it. And it's just another example. All 5 of the things that I've named that are on my flyer I am for the first 2, stopping Common Core, for parental rights, against usurping the office of the state superintendent, against Obamacare, and against using taxpayer monies for things like auto racing. And when you see my flyer, under this card, it shows Mr. Worsley's record on those same points. And you will see that he was against the 2 things I'm for, and he was for the 3 things that I'm against. And so they're an example of where we stand on the basic issues of whether or not we're constitutional or we're not. So on the back of my flyer, I also have my pledge to the people of the Legislative District 25. And if you don't mind, I will read it because I don't have it committed to memory. I just know that I believe it because I wrote it. So I pledge to work to restore limited government, work to stop Common Core, work to restore parents' rights to direct their children's education, defend our Arizona Constitutional Office of State Superintendent of Public Instruction and the inherent powers and duties therein. And that's critical. The powers and duties are inherent, and that's the argument that the opposition won with, was saying that there are no inherent powers and duties. But that's not true, because if it's a constitutional office, there are inherent powers and duties. And then work to restore constitutional local control of public schools, stand against Obama's bathroom decree, and defend and uphold the United States and Arizona state constitutions against all assaults on our liberty under God. So that's my pledge.
Very good.
And the other important thing that's on here, besides there is some information about me here also, but the other important part is there are instructions as to what to expect for writing in my name. And so it should help you to see that it's not that difficult. It's just knowing what to do. And the key is I am an official filed write-in candidate. My information is on the candidate page with the Secretary of State, along with all the other statewide offices. And so just because I'm a write-in doesn't mean that I'm not recognized. So by being an official candidate, a write-in candidate, I am actually on the ballot. It's just that it doesn't say my name. There's a bubble and there's a line that represent me. So, and the other thing that I would like to, and this card is also has the write-in instructions in abbreviated, and you can put it in your purse, your wallet, your pocket to keep for when you go to vote. Okay, I'd just like to tell you this is what these documents are examples of what I have done in the last two sessions and what I intend to continue to do, whether I'm elected or not, and hopefully even more so if I am elected. What I did was, when I knew that there was a real problem with the state superintendent and the State Board of Education, I researched the statutes, I researched the Constitution, and I tried very hard with a lot of other people last year, and we, along with the legislators in the House, we stopped the attempt to destroy the office of the superintendent last year. But
yes.
Praise the Lord. And this year, we didn't succeed. But in preparation for this year, I knew they were going to have to try it again because of all of the ramifications of everything that happened. And I won't go into all the details, because when I do, it's a lot of details. So But what I did was I researched more the history of Arizona, the territory, and the state around the state board and the state superintendent of public instruction, so that I gained a really thorough understanding of what's really behind the whole aspect of what is in our Constitution, why it's the way it's written, and why it was written in a certain way that actually is, they wrote it in a way that they wanted to be able to control the state superintendent as a collectivist, progressive, statist goal of the people who wrote the Constitution, most of them, who were progressives, which means collectivists. And so they wrote the Constitution planning for the state board to have power, but for the state superintendent to have a different kind of power, and to have them both working together to keep the power from the governor and have it in the hands of the people through the superintendent, but at the same time have an influence from the governor through the state board and the nominations. But having the nominations to the board had to be consented to by the state legislature. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and it has gone in such a way that we now have a very powerful state board, much more than it's supposed to. It's doing much more than it's supposed to do, and the governor is taking the power from the superintendent, and the legislature is part of this so far. Members of the legislature have been part of this, along with the governor and other powers. So the good thing is that the way they wrote the Constitution, in order for it not to be too obvious that that's what they were trying to do, is what makes it possible for us to fix the problem by statute and not by having to amend the Constitution. Because the Constitution is written in such a way that if you know what a state board that's constitutional should be doing and what the state superintendent should be doing, then you know that the Constitution does not allow what is being done. And what it does allow is for us to fix it. So what I did next was I wrote a proposed Title 15 bill, which is, well, first, this is what I wrote. It's, I think, 9 pages. I wrote this about the history and explaining what I just said, and introducing this. And what this is a proposed Title 15 bill to fix the problem with the state superintendent and the state board of education and the state legislature. And it is, well, the first page is actually a synopsis of what's in there to the representatives. And this it's 28 pages, and I'm going to put it on the table where anyone can look at it to get an idea what it takes to write a proposed legislation to amend existing statutes and to add new statutes, because this does cover all. Yes, Jim?
Do you risk anything by putting it on your website?
No. Oh, thank you. I hadn't thought about it. I will do that. I will put it on. Thank you.
Good.
Yes. There's so many things to think about. I haven't been able to think of everything. So it's 28 pages, and if you want to read it on the website, it'll be on there as soon as I can get it on there, with Mark helping me if I'm not able to get it done.
I'm sure you have it in PDF.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, well, email it to me.
Okay, great. Mark is our website guru. He built our website, and he did such a great job of it that I've been able to go in there and play with it myself. And so I'm really, really thankful for him. So what I did was I coordinated with one of the state senators who was my state senator before I became a permanent resident here. And that particular state senator was on the other side wanting to use the statutes to deny the Constitution and do what they did. And they did succeed. But after working with that particular senator a little bit and knowing that it wasn't going to go anywhere, then I made sure that it was timely sent to all of the senators. And then when we knew that it was going to go to the House, coordinated with Representative Kelly Townsend of LD 16. She's been a real champion for the office and for parents' rights. We coordinated getting it to all of the representatives by email. And so they all have it. I have no idea if they've all read it. They probably haven't, but I shouldn't say that because I don't know. But they all have it. Thank you. So they all have it, and I just want you to know that if you send me there on to be able to work on the floor, the Senate floor, and not just watch from the gallery, I will be pursuing this.
Yeah.
And I will not drop this. This is critical to returning the power to the people and to the people's children.
Yeah.
And protecting the children. Now, however, there is the danger that if you protect the elective office, if opponents get their person in to the office, then we'll have to fight someone who is for Common Core. But that's the beauty of it. Exactly. That's what we can do as the people with elective officials. It's not the same as the governor being able to appoint an office of education in the executive branch, different than in the executive department under him, that's separate from the official executive office over education, which is the superintendent. The governor has no authority over education other than nominating the members of the state board. Nominating them.
Yeah.
What are you putting me?
Yeah.
I may be dumber than everybody here, and I know that there was a conflict between the governor and the state superintendent. Can you briefly describe what that was over?
I will try to make it brief.
Okay.
Thank you, because I go into too many details for.
Well, I was thinking maybe everybody knows all the details but me, but I don't know all the details. I just knew there was a problem.
Okay,
We're all
the
running for office, so you're clearly not the dumbest person.
Exactly. Very good, Ross. Thank you. Okay, what happened was the governor apparently wanted to assert his power over education right away, which was obvious from his answers to questions about Common Core and education while he was running. The only problem was that we weren't listening and hearing exactly what he was saying and knowing that he said it every time, which was when he was asked about Common Core, he said he was against Common Core.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
But he always, from everything that I was able to research and find, he always added the caveat that he would get people together. This may not be exact words. He would get people together and they would take a look at it and see what needed to be done. Not, we will get rid of Common Core, but we will take a look, which is exactly what he's got the superintendent, the state board to do. Their review and replace, which was not his own idea. It was Republican governors across the country with their smoke and mirrors plan to fool people into thinking they were going to get rid of Common Core when they're really actually for it.
Okay.
So in the beginning of January, when Superintendent Douglas was experiencing difficulties with two people who were employees of the Department of Education under the superintendent, engaged to do services for the state board, those people were, I can't remember the word, sorry, they were not doing, they were for Common Core, and they were doing the opposite of what they were. What is it called when you
Dismiss.
when you're supposed to do something in a job and you deliberately say, no, I'm not going to do it.
DC.
Subordination.
Abdication.
Insubordination, thank you.
Oh, okay.
So they were
So she was
insubordinate.
directing them to do some things and they refused.
Right.
And were acting in opposition.
Right, so her chief of staff fired them and created a big firestorm, and because everybody thought that the board, that they were employees of the board.
Oh.
They weren't. But they managed to say that the statutes were ambiguous, which they're not if you read them correctly. There are two uses of the word employ and employees in the statutes. There were. They've changed it now. But because they succeeded in what they wanted to do. You employ people as hired employees if you have a department like the Department of Education. The people working for that department are hired by that department under the head of that department as hired employees. And you're responsible for them, they're responsible to you. Someone else can employ the services of those hired employees to do work for them if the Department of Education allows that to happen. So that's basically what it is. There is a statute that has now been changed, and will, when it goes into effect, it will be changed, that basically said the State Board of Education shall employ, oh boy, I used to have this memorized, now I'm not getting it. But it basically says that they're employees of the board. The board's employees shall be employees of the Department of Education. So people think that that's ambiguous because they're not understanding it's two different uses of the word employ, and Black's Law Dictionary gives you these two different uses. So they played with that and said they're employed by the board, so they're the board's employees. But some friends of mine and I informed the legislature that they're not employed by the board as hired employees because boards can't, at least
Yeah, they can't find
the state board of education is not supposed to be able to hire employees. They're a board, they're not an agency. So because we told them that they're a board and not an agency, they pulled a fast one last year, and with about 4 different unconstitutional acts, they pretended to make the state board a state agency so that they could say that the state board employs employees by hiring them and paying them and all of that. They took money from the Department of Education for those employees illegally because it wasn't allocated to the state board when they took it. So there's at least 4 things wrong in what they did last year in pretending that the board is a state agency. So they went from there and they tried to pass destroying the office of the superintendent last year. Well, they were trying to do it anyway, but when they did the agency, then they tried even harder to get that passed because they knew that they had to change the statutes that some of us understood so that they could have cover for the fact that they were pretending that the board was now an agency. Well, when we defeated it, they were not happy. So that's why I knew that they were going to have to do something this time. So the whole thing stemmed from the governor saying, you can't fire these people because they work for the board. And the superintendent saying, yes, I can because they work for me. Well, sadly, the superintendent was given bad advice, and she said, okay, I'll let you change the statutes and clarify the statutes, and you can have your employees, as long as I can go ahead and do what needs to be done for the kids. And I don't want to use the money for the children and their education to fight a court battle. Well, sadly, that was the wrong thing to do, because it gave them more
fodder.
Yeah, more fodder to be able to fight with, to pretend to the people that they were in the right. So that's basically what the whole thing is about. And the superintendent realized at a certain point that it wasn't the right thing to do, and she started fighting. And she fought them through the whole year on these employees, and they moved the employees to the executive tower, and they wanted those employees to be able to access the Department of Education records on the teachers that they were investigating. And the superintendent refused to let them access those records because it would not be as secure as it would be if they were doing it in the building where the records are housed. So she refused to do that. So there was a lawsuit between her and the board, and then there was another lawsuit back and forth about the. So that's basically. Does that help?
Yes, a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So.
Itasca, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
As I understand it, and Jennifer, you might know even more of this, that the Department of Education at the federal level, well, Bill, my husband Bill, found out that the executive department of the federal government, the president, has 4 million employees. As I understand it, 350 are here in Arizona under the National Department of Education. Is that anywhere near?
Or Jana may know the numbers. You don't? Okay.
I really don't know the numbers, and if you're saying that 350 from Washington, D.C. would be working here in Phoenix, that's a good possibility because you have a lot of consultants and a lot of Washington, D.C. people that fly back and forth. But I don't know if the 350 is
Well,
correct.
I do know that
John Huppendahl said when he was superintendent that 350 of his employees under the Department of Education were working directly for the federal government on federal government federal government programs. Is that the same today? I'm not sure, but when he was a superintendent, he admitted of his 500 employees, 350 were working directly for federal programs.
and I can tell you that if Beth were here, Beth Algren, she was hoping to be able to make it, but I don't see her.
She called. Go ahead.
Okay, if Beth was here, she could give you the exact number, at least as of a year ago. The numbers are higher than 350. But the total numbers of people working in the Department of Education here, our Department of Education, are higher than that now too. And it seems to me that it's something like 700 or 800 that's the total, and a huge percentage of that are people working that are federal Department of Education employees. They are working in our Department of Education. And so it is true. It's just that the numbers are higher than what you were told.
Okay. So my question is more of a general question for you, and it'll be for Ross too. What's your opinion about nullifying federal programs in Arizona? Nullification.
I believe that the 9th and 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution answer that question.
Right.
And the federal government does not have any authority in the U.S. Constitution to do anything about education, and the 9th and 10th Amendments reserve those powers to the states. So yes, I would definitely do whatever I can to nullify any federal intervention, mandates that are not something that the Constitution tells them they can do.
You know, that's such a huge problem, and it's always so surprising that the legislature would not vote to get rid of EPA regulations, for example. We didn't have fires, in the forests until we were mandated not to have lumbering, et cetera, and they've done their best to run cattle off lands here, and the cattle kept down the brush, especially manzanita. Manzanita burns so hot. Anyway, sorry to get on a thing like that.
No, that's very good. And I actually, having lived a long time in Navajo County, I did have to flee the smoke from the rodeo Chetaskai and watch all the reports on the TV at my sister's house down here about was it going to reach my house, and we did have embers that were reaching my area, which is northeast of Heber Overgaard. That was how devastating Rodeo Chetaskai was. And it's not just the lumbering, even though that's a huge part of it. And the cattle, it's the prescribed burns. They have not allowed the underbrush and the small trees that would not survive a normal nature caused fire, that the forests need fire. God has maintained our forests on this globe since the beginning with natural fires, because if you have natural fires periodically, you don't have that undergrowth and all the small trees that feed the big fires when they happen. Those are what cause the fires to be able to reach the top so quickly and burn so hot and jump from the crowns of the trees to the next crowns. And that's what makes the fires like Rodeo Chetaskai happen. And it's all because the federal government has so poorly mismanaged the forests.
Which is not an accident.
Right, it's not, I believe that too.
All right.
The other issue is that by nature, rain is a little bit acidic, and when it gets in the lakes, the acidity of the lakes tend to increase over time. And when you have the forest fire, the ash from the fire would flow down into the lakes and counter the acidity of the lakes. So when they said we got acid rain, it was kind of the sky is falling, because only you can prevent forest fires. So we stopped all the ash that was countering this by nature, and therefore, by the fact that we did that, the acidity went up. And so we were causing it unknowingly.
Great, thank you very much. Because I like to know everything, and I hadn't made that connection. Thank you. So.
Okay, other questions for Itasca?
Dave.
Itasca, at the March Arizona Judicial Council meeting, a member of the public asked the Arizona Supreme Court Chief Justice Scott Bells about incidents where at public meetings recording had been forbidden and news agencies had been refused to be allowed in according to state open meetings laws. His response was that as a separate branch of government, the judicial branch is not subject to open meeting laws or open records laws. How would you feel about that as a legislator?
I want to understand that much better, because it doesn't sound like something I would agree with. I actually have some ideas, having worked with our Keep the Republic team in Mesa last year with open meeting laws relative to the Mesa Public School governing board. I have some suggestions that would tend to become possible legislation for clarifying some things that I think are not clear about the open meeting laws, and making it easier for the people to have the benefit of the purpose of an open meeting law. There are a lot of roadblocks still that keep people from being able to actually have the information that we're supposed to have through the open meeting laws. And we're supposed to, when we sign that we want to be a candidate, we're warned that if you are elected, you're going to have to read the open meeting law, and you're going to have to sign something that says that you read it and you understand it. And I have no problem with that. But obviously everybody thinks it's important, but it's not doing the job that I think it should do for people.
One thing about Mesa schools, they do have a closed session, and we're not allowed to get in on that. So they make all their little decisions. And so when they come to the people,
Speak louder, Karen. There'll be a lot of people.
oh, I'm sorry, I have a soft voice, sorry. Mesa school system has a closed meeting time, and no one's supposed to go to that, it's just for them. That's when they make all their little decisions. And so when they do have the open meeting, it's all done. it's all done.
And that's one of the things
That's
that
bad.
that we saw
You're bad.
last year, was that it's very difficult to get anything on the agenda, and what we wanted on the agenda was open, public call to the public, an open call to the public, not just something restricted to only what's on the agenda. And it was really fascinating to see what they went through to try and keep that from happening. Jean was involved. It was unbelievable what they went through to try and keep it from happening. We had a victory in that they finally realized that maybe they should have an open call to the public once a month, which is better than none. It's a victory. So
It is so hard for them to do anything decent, it really is.
and what they do in those closed sessions, the executive sessions, it's not strictly what the open meeting law calls for. Gene?
We really shamed them into having an open meeting law.
The call to the public?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't do as much at the end, and Gene and the others did more at the end. So
Another thing too about, I want to ask you, Mr. Cowan, he's been their little leader for how long now?
I don't know. Gene might know.
How long is Mr.
About
Cowan?
8 years,
How many?
8 or 9 years.
So
Yeah.
is there a law,
Going on
is there a term limits there?
I don't think there are any
No,
term
there
limits.
is no law. In
Well,
fact,
see, that's
he
something we
was
should work
reappointed.
on, you know, they shouldn't
the
have been
last
there that
meeting.
long.
He was reappointed at the last meeting as the
Oh,
president.
well, of course.
Okay. Well, and what I'd like to end with is that I brought these so that you could see them. And this is 2 org charts, my perception of what the Arizona Public School System K through 12 before and as of 2016. And then the second one is a proposed org chart. And so I brought these so that you could look at them, and as Jim pointed out, I need to put them on the website so that you'll be able to go and find them there without having to ask me to email them to you, which is what I was just going to say I would do. To give you an idea of, this is what I will do, the Lord willing, this is what I will do on every issue that comes before me, as much as humanly possible with God's help. Because I thrive on understanding the laws, the statutes, the Constitution. I thrive on doing the research and writing it. And everything that comes up tweaks my interest as, is this constitutional or is it not? And I will research and I will stand for what the Constitution calls for.
Very good.